IJM was founded in 1997 by Gary Haugen, who was an attorney at the Department of Justice. And in 1994, following the Rwandan genocide, Gary was sent on loan to the UN to lead the investigation against those responsible for the crimes there. His work there caused him to realize that all the humanitarian aid to Rwanda couldn't have stopped the genocide. Better schooling, medicine, housing, food, none of those things would have helped them. The almost 1 million people who were murdered there, what they needed was their police, their courts, to prevent these crimes from happening in the first place. And that's how the idea for IJM began. Most donors will be familiar with international aid that addresses disease and hunger, education and housing. But there's another category of need that doesn't immediately come to mind, and that's people who aren't suffering because they lack medical care or a classroom, but because of violence. And that's usually because they're poor and they're powerless. There are people desperately in need who are forced into sex trafficking, slavery, who are raped and subjected to police brutality. And there are actually laws against these crimes in the countries where we work. It's just simply that the laws are not being enforced. And that's what we do. We help countries uphold their laws so that the poor are protected from violence. Our current objective is to rescue thousands and to protect millions from violence. So a great question many people ask is, I understand that IJM rescues people from violence and slavery, but how exactly do you do it? Well, here's how. First, we gather evidence. IJM investigators, posing as customers wearing undercover cameras, go into places like brothels, where children are being offered for sale for sex. We go into slave sites, where entire families are subjected to brutal labor. And we do this so that we can gather this evidence on video, record it and document it, and then take that evidence to the local police. When faced with hard evidence, police are encouraged to move, and then IJM assists the local police to conduct rescue operations. Our lawyers then take the task of putting perpetrators behind bars so that these crimes are actually prevented from happening in the future. And IJM social workers, they take our clients under their care where they receive medical attention, counseling, and vocational training. Through doing this sort of casework, we see firsthand where the system is broken, and we work to fix these problems. So if you can imagine the justice system to be a pipe, and in a functioning justice system, injustice goes in and justice is the end product. In the communities where we work, by being involved every step of the way from investigations all the way through aftercare, we get to see where the problems are, whether it's corruption or a lack of training, understaffing, or poor aftercare. And by being a part of the process, we actually get to help fix those problems by holding people accountable for their crimes. We provide police training and we help equip officials because we want to promote change so that public justice systems actually work for the poor. Since 2005, IJM has provided victim relief for more than 10,000 individuals. The major leverage point that makes our work successful is our casework model. As IJM lawyers, investigators, and social workers work on individual cases, we learn a public justice system inside and out, and we are uniquely positioned to speak accurately into the problems that that particular justice system has. We're involved in every piece of the justice system, and we have a tangible solution to offer. We're not just pointing out the problem and raising awareness, we're in the trenches. And because we're there day in and day out, we have street credibility with the local officials and authorities because they've worked with us before. Where we're the most successful, we benchmark those models to replicate in other areas. A 4-year program in Cebu, the Philippines, where we applied our multi-level casework, we reduced the availability of minor girls for sex by 79%. We're now replicating this particular model in other areas in Southeast Asia. Fixing broken justice systems in a country is absolutely foundational for other aid work to be successful. So for example, farming tools are of no use to widows whose land has been stolen. Vocational training is not helpful to people who've been thrown in jail because they were unable to pay a bribe. Local medical clinics can't treat bonded slaves who aren't allowed to leave the factory even when they're sick. And microloans for new sewing machines don't benefit the poor if the profits are stolen by police. Our work is an effective investment in the developing world. We hire really great people who are qualified, and they come to IJM because they're passionate about the work. And over 95% of our staff in the field are nationals in the countries where they work. This gives them the vantage point of knowing the culture and the country, and of being personally invested in the work and in the community. Sometimes clients that we've rescued go back to school to become social workers and come back to work with us. They're leaders who will be there with us for the long run. So if you could imagine a group of driven type A achievers, you'd have a really good idea of who is working at IJM. We absolutely love metrics. Everything is measured. We have monthly metrics for our casework, for how we care for our clients, for how many cases we win, for how many perpetrators we arrest and convict, and we track the progress of each and every single one of our aftercare clients. As an organization, we've set into practice doing baseline studies, and that means we measure the effects of our casework before and then after we begin our casework. And where we're the most successful, we benchmark those models to replicate in other areas. What we want people to know is that we have a long-term presence in the communities where we serve. Our offices are located in 13 countries, so we're not just swooping in to simply raise awareness about the issues that we face. We actually do the casework. And 95% of our staff are nationals of the countries where they work, so we're literally raising up and equipping national leaders with the goal of eventually working ourselves out of a job in these countries. That's why training the local police, prosecutors, and officials is central to the work that we do. At IJM, we do the impossible. When we first started, it was thought to be impossible to rescue little girls from brothels in Cambodia or slaves from brick kilns in India. Experts said in the field that it could not be done. But from 2006 to 2011, IJM provided victim relief to over 10,000 people and secured the convictions of 438 traffickers, rapists, slave owners, and other people who violently abused the poor. And now we're working to show that when you put criminals in jail, when you train the police, and when you enforce the law, criminals leave the poor alone. And that's why the project funded by the Gates Foundation was so important. It showed a 79% decrease in the trafficking of children in the Metro Cebu area. There was no increase in the education of the community, or there was no increase in the income of the families. But what changed was you would go to jail for trafficking children, and people did not want to go to jail for that. So our major accomplishment is that we're rescuing thousands and literally protecting millions. And it was said to be impossible, but it's not. It's just really hard work. Hands down, the biggest challenges we face involve corruption in the communities where we work. For example, when we first started working in Cambodia, we tried and couldn't secure collaboration from anyone in the government to stop the open sale of children on the streets. But we overcame this corruption by finding officials of goodwill. And today, though trafficking hasn't been eradicated in Cambodia, it is far different than when it once was. Children aren't sold on the street anymore, and one of the brothels where we rescued several children has now become a community center. And in every area where we work, we formed partnerships of goodwill with law enforcement officials who want to do what is right. That is why our casework is so important, because we get to see exactly where the system is broken, we see who is corrupt, but we also see who's willing to do good. With additional resources, we would love to expand our work. We would want to bring what we've learned to other communities with similar violence. We'd like to replicate our effective models, because the limitation on our work isn't the amount of injustice, it's the resources to take our work to other communities. The gaps we would like to fill are in areas of the world where we're currently not operating, that would allow us to bring working models to whole new groups of victims of violence and oppression. There's certain types of slave labor we would love to be able to address that we simply haven't had the resources to tackle yet, or sex trafficking in other countries that could benefit from our lessons learned in the countries we currently work, places we could take these new models.